Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Today, that is our own JP Finlay, of course, part of the Odyssey family, host of B. Mitch and Finlay over on 1067 The Fan, of course, NBC Sports, or NBC4 Commanders Insider as well, and host of the Beltway Football Pod. JP, what's up, man?
What up, Hoff? How you doing, bud?
Doing well. Hanging in there, covering all this stuff, talking about all of it, trying not to throw things, listening to Ron Rivera's press conference, because that seemed to be a lot of nonsense that he was spewing. You were in the room, though. Sometimes it plays different in the room. As he starts talking about the quarterback stuff, when you guys are asking about the 2 D linemen he just traded, like what was the reaction, both your internal monologue and in the room?
Fairly similar to yours, dude. It's tricky because Ron's in a tough spot here. I think if you're just an outside observer without a dog in the fight and you saw yesterday's events, it's hard to feel like Ron is going to be the guy driving this bus past this season, but he still has to drive it right now, and he still has to come and answer questions. And I think if there is a path forward for him, it is Howell being the guy and him finding it and nurturing that along. And I think, if that's the plan, then he could, maybe he's trying to speak it into existence. Part of what he's saying, they allocated a ton to the defensive side of the ball in draft capital and salary cap space over the years, right? And now maybe it's time to recalibrate that. I think that is fair and should be the vision going forward. But the problem here is, like, you were the one that allocated the draft capital and the salary cap money to that side of the ball. So it rings a little hollow. But what's it supposed to say? You know what I mean?
I mean, here's what I would honestly say, JP.
The new owner forced my hand.
Yeah,
right.
But I think I would be more focused on the now. Like as Anthony was like, yo, that was a bar. The bar that I accidentally dropped in my rant was basically quit talking about a future you're not going to be a part of. Which is to say, like, focus on, for once, will a coach just actually focus on the game in front of him? And I know he's got to answer questions about the trades and the deadline, but, like, I would talk about why, look, these two are very talented players, but it's clearly not working. You look at our production this year, it's not what we wanted, so we're going to try something else. Like, you can do that without the total pivot to, hey, Josh, by the way, we have this young quarterback, and please let that be my saving grace. Like, it's very bizarre.
Yeah. No, that's fair. No, I think you're right. I think Ron often thinks and, like, waxes poetic about, like, the big picture, and I think part of that perhaps is because he's had so much control out here for so long that he wants to make things big picture rather than – because the week-to-week results have often varied significantly, and that variance you could be construed as an indictment on him, right? Because there's no consistency. So if you talk big picture about how close they are and all the obstacles that have been overcome through what have been a ridiculously tumultuous set of years, there's kind of a message there. But you're right. I mean, plenty of coaches, most famously the one he's set to go up against this weekend, just would be like, no, I'm only talking about the game this weekend or whatever. And I don't know. Chandler, famously, Rich Chandler would always say, watch what they do, don't listen to what they say.
Yep.
And what they did yesterday, I think tells you all you need to know.
JP Finlay is with us, host of B. Mitch and Finlay on 1067 The Fan, NBC4's Commanders Insider. So let's play his game for a second, though, because I don't know that that's actually that kind to him either. I mean, you and I were on the beat in 2019 when it all went sideways, when it all went south, and Jay gets fired. And, this is, I always, when I bring this stuff up, I put this disclaimer. This is not a defense of Jay. This is not to say they didn't make the right decisions around Jay. It's just to draw a comparison of, like, if it was bad then where are we now? How much different of a situation are they in at that coaching and roster level? Or is the only real change that, like, okay, now we have hope for the future because there's a competent owner here? Like, I actually don't think from a football standpoint, I know there's been tumult, I know there's been stuff, but, like, I don't know that he's actually changed that much other than a reorganization of the deck chairs on the Titanic.
that 19 team was really bad. I mean, if you go back and look at kind of the starters, look at who they had. Terry kind of bailed them out at wide receiver. I mean, that team was bereft of talent, and I don't know that there's a ton of it here, but whatever you've got in Sam is number one, right? And then, you still have Allen and Payne.
Who were there then?
True. I was going to say Fuller, but he was there then. I guess he had been traded by then.
Yeah, he was traded in the Smith deal, so he came back.
I like Curl a lot. I don't know, that he's there next year. Being out here every day organizationally, it doesn't feel like it did then. I mean, there is some removal of kind of the way I always described Ashburn in those days. It was kind of just like a little bit of a frat house, like a little bit of a boys club. And clearly some of the investigations and stuff that have come out have kind of proven that to be true. But, I mean, from a straight-up talent standpoint and where they are contractually, maybe it's not that dissimilar. But that team in 19, I mean, they started 0-5, right? And then Jay got canned. What did they finish? 3-13, I believe?
Yeah, it was bad. And part of that, too, was...
I think this team is better than that.
Yeah. No, agreed.
But what's funny is I've heard from enough people, certainly here, I mean, Ron says it on the record, but elsewhere that do say, that team's got some talent. Yeah, Terry, Dotson, I like Logan, who's under contract. I do think, I mean, even guys like John Ridgway could play for you. I'm not making any comparisons to Chase Young or Montez Sweat because, there's a reason those guys are first rounders. There's a reason those guys are probably 5-star recruits, all that sort of stuff. But I think Tuhill and Smith Williams could play. I think there may be an emotional response for those guys out there this week. But I'd have to look at the rosters.
I'm pulling it up right now for funsies since we're in it because I actually think it's interesting. And part of it is the look. And so roster for roster, this one is more talented, but I also don't know that it's trending in the right direction. I think there might have been a peak in talent somewhere in the middle of what was left and what is here now.
But what I would say, and you might be right, you probably got a C+ and a C- roster, if I'm guessing, and I'm not looking at it.
Yeah, so the starters offensively, Case, that experiment didn't work at quarterback. AP at age 34 still almost got 1,000 yards. You had Kelvin Harmon and Terry at receiver, and the Paul Richardson thing didn't work. Tight end, I mean, that season gets derailed in the preseason when Jordan gets hurt. Jordan Reed looked like he was back to Hall of Fame Jordan Reed.
Yeah, I remember that game in Atlanta.
And then,
that was awful.
Yeah, but their offensive line is Donald Penn that winds up playing left tackle after everything happens with Trent.
Yeah.
Right, but then you got Flowers, who was good at left guard, Chase at center, Sheriff was there, Morgan Moses. And on the D-line, it's Allen, Payne, Ioannidis, Sweat, Cole Holcomb, Bostic, Kerrigan, Quentin Dunbar, Josh Norman, Landon Collins, Monte Nicholson. So, that's not a great roster by any stretch, but are we going to look back and say, some of these guys that aren't in the league anymore now, in 4 years, 5 years, are we going to be saying the same about a bunch of guys on this roster? And I would just say, JP, to kind of round out this point, I feel like much more of the changes that have happened on some of the stuff you're talking about definitely helped by Rivera, and I would never take that away from Ron. But a lot of that stuff is also the change from Bruce to Jason, as opposed to from where you look at specifically the football. Again, how much different is it from Jay to Ron as someone in charge of the actual football playing and football players?
It's an interesting debate, and it may not be that different, and whether this, frankly, I think it's the new owners, at least this team was cognizant to start to change it in November, October, whatever day, rather than waiting. You know what I mean? And that to me is why yesterday, when Ron, Hurney, this whole crew gets shown the door, yesterday was more important because it showed that not only or there are changes coming, but there's foresight. Like there's a vision, there's leadership, rather than what we've seen for so long is just short-sighted and haphazard.
No doubt.
And I think that man, it was weird in that locker room. Like the guys were cool. You know, they kind of said the right thing on camera. But, I mean, dude, Hoff, you've been in there. Like, those Chase and Tez are loud and big. You know, like their presence is felt. And they're often, like, kind of arguing, kind of joking around. Like, the D-line section of the locker room, like the physical geography of it, tends to be the loudest, kind of most boisterous. And a lot of that was because Tez and Chase were on like the edges of it, much like the actual D-line. And they were loud and boisterous fellas. Like it feels different. And I don't know that like that can be kind of processed in a day. You know, I think over a week, you know, a month, you start to like kind of figure out the new lay of the land. But yeah, as far as Ron trying to make yesterday's events about their belief, imagine if the trade deadline was a week earlier and like Ron had to try to sell that Sam Howell routine after the Giants game.
Yeah, good luck with that.
You couldn't have done it. He would not have chosen that course of action. So, dude, the other thing, Hoff, and I cannot wait to talk to B-Mitch about this tomorrow, but Ron mentioned Eugene Shen, who apparently doesn't start till next week. And I've been kind of disagreeing with people that thought he wasn't already in charge. And Ron said it yesterday. So I found that really interesting. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be the final personnel guy or anything like that, but I did find that quite interesting.
I did as well. It's one of the things I immediately noted at the end of that press conference because he's not supposed to start till next week. Kind of half jokingly was like, oh, that HR is going to love that. But realistically, like, good. Like, he should be involved in the decision making. He's very, like, everything he's going to do once he officially starts is predicated based off how you handle this trade deadline. So good on that front. I want to circle back, though. JP Finley's with us, of course. B. Mitch and Finley tomorrow, 10 a.m. Do not be late for that, as he and B. Mitch will be talking about all this stuff over on 106.7 The Fan. You can listen to them like you can listen to us on the free Odyssey app. But circling back to kind of that idea that Chase and Montez were these two huge personalities. And certainly that was something that came naturally to Chase. I think it's something that Montez developed a comfort level over the course of his career. Very quiet as a rookie and as an early career player, has gotten louder, found his voice, which is great. But I do think that, like, if you're Josh Harris and you're thinking about the future and you're Eugene Shen and you're like, yeah, we're going to be thinking about the future and we want to build a new culture, we want it to look different than what it is right now, you can't move forward till you get rid of some of the loudest voices in the room currently if you don't feel like they're pushing things in the right direction. Do you think that that is part of the reason, especially for Chase, why they're willing to accept what seems like a slightly below market offer as opposed to waiting these last 9 games out and seeing if you can trade him for more this offseason?
Help me understand the machinations of trading him this offseason when he's not under contract.
Well, you could always tag him and trade him, right? So, like, there is a risk that nobody wants it. But, like, I think the idea would be, like, if he balls out for 9 games and you tag him, and then could you get him for even a regular third as opposed to this compensatory that's basically a fourth? Like, what's the downside? And my response to that would be the downside is you have to keep him for 9 more games when you want to reset in your locker room. And maybe that's more of what Ron's talking about, you know, as opposed to just like, oh, we want to get James Smith-Williams and Casey Tuhill more snaps.
I think I'd be a little hesitant to tag Chase with his medical history, knowing that becomes a fully guaranteed $25 million on your books. Right?
There's that too. Yeah.
I think I perhaps disagree. Like, I don't know how much your car costs, right? But like, if you go to the dealership and the car is $50,000 for talking sake, and you go to another dealership and it's $50,000, and one more just because you're being prudent, and it's $50,000 there. Like the car costs $50,000.
Yeah.
The market conditions surrounding Chase Young, I don't think there was like two ones floating around and they turned it down. You know what I mean?
I get that. I don't want to get sidetracked on like that part of it. I guess it's just like there's an argument to be made for sure that if he goes out and finishes the season with 14 sacks, that there is a scenario where he gets more this offseason. And my point would be, and like I guess what I'm trying to ask here in terms of like their personalities within the team is there's actually value and it is worth it to get rid of him now and kind of start over in your locker room, even if the coach is still there and everything, but to kind of empower John Allen a little bit more and Terry a little bit more in the way they go about their business versus a guy in Chase who clearly has a loud voice and a big presence, but then you watch the tape and you're like, yeah, but it'd be cool if you tried harder on run plays. Like that kind of that personality dynamics is really what I'm getting at here. How much value is that, or is there in that, and how much truth is there to that, and kind of their large place in the locker room?
Okay, gotcha. I think with Chase, he's the kind of guy that absorbs a lot of the air in the locker room, and when it's going good, it's awesome. But when it's going bad, it really sucks. It's like a vacuum, right? And I think at times, I mean, to your point, like the tape is the tape, right? Like if a play is going away from Casey Toohill, he's going to chase the hell out of that play. He's going to literally sprint as fast as he can after that play, even though he might not be in it at its inception. You didn't always see that from 99, period. Yeah. So I think there's some of that. Dude, Ron said that Eugene Shen showed them the value of the trades, and I believe that because there's no chance these dudes wanted to trade Montez, period. They did. They want to win games. There's no way they wanted to trade Sweat. Now, maybe you have some hesitation to offer Montez $100 million and have to guarantee 52 million of it, but they didn't want to trade away Sweat. I think they wanted to trade away Chase. They didn't think they'd be able to get the right team, the right offer. And I think, honestly, certainly you got the right team in the Niners because they want Chase for a title run right now. That's what, like that. There's not going to be long-term talks with Chase because they are focused on the Super Bowl this year, whereas Chicago is going to be trying to get a deal done with Sweat, so he's a part of their program going forward. And I think that tells you something, right? That, in my opinion, covering this team closely, they were cool with trading Chase, just weren't sure if they'd be able to do it. And they didn't want to give up Sweat, and that Chicago is going to be looking to lock up Sweat, and I don't expect that to happen in San Francisco, at least not right away.
Right, and that's kind of what I'm getting to is like I used this example yesterday, but it's like it's the Brian Windhorst meme from the why would they do that? Like people need to realize like what is happening here. The team wanted to trade Chase, and that while there may be stuff that we don't know about yet, like out there as to why, and like some of it is the effort stuff for sure. Like it doesn't take a genius to read between the lines here that they were willing to part with him, and not just willing to, they wanted to part with him, and there was probably a reason why. I know that then gets into whether or not you trust the decision makers, but that is worth something, and I think that is a hard thing for fans to hear for a guy that has so much talent, has so much potential, but we are also 4 years into this.
But dude, I'd also add, I think there's a possibility for Chase that San Fran is exactly what he needs.
100%.
I think going to a place, I think he's going to be held to a much higher standard. I think Dan Snyder enabled Chase early on. I mean, we saw this so much where the stars get coddled and treated differently, and then the injuries happened. I also wonder, dude, I remember, this stuck with me throughout my time covering Chase. At the Combine, when I first met him, so we're talking February of 20, right before the world closed, right?
Yep.
I stalk him out, get a little one-on-one interview for television, and I was like, sure looks like you're going to land in your hometown. How excited are you about that? He's like, man, it'll be cool, but I know DC, and I know that it's a lot of fake love, and that always stuck with me. Part of me thinks, I believe he has started to kind of make his offseason home in Denver and Los Angeles. Like, part of me throughout this process thought he didn't want to be at home. And I don't know if that's family or friends or the pressure of being a hometown star, all of that stuff. But I do think it was part of it. And granted, you know, you live out in Leesburg, it ain't exactly inside the Beltway. But, like, I think there's always been more pressure from fans or the number 2 overall pick, all of these things. I think, like, he's not going to be able to take off a run play in San Fran because he'll get benched and he'll get yelled at. And I don't know. You know what I mean? I just think
totally
the type of players they have out there, and he won't have the pressure of – he's not the star. I did Matt Mayoko's podcast. If you know Mayoko, he's been covering the Niners forever. Great dude. And, I mean, where does Chase even rank in the stardom out there? Like,
he's like
McCaffrey, Bosa, Fred Warner, Trent.
Debo, Trent, down the list. Kittle.
And, I don't know that much about Fred Warner. I don't know that I've ever spoken to him. But, like, Fred Warner strikes me as a dude that if Chase doesn't finish a play, he will be in his face about it.
Yeah, no, there's going to be a different comfort level. And to be clear, like, I don't want this to all come off as us saying this is 100% a reflection of Chase. This is also a reflection of the organization. Like, these statements, the fact that he could go somewhere else and be better, are an indictment of the people that have been here and not been able to get that same level of accountability. But at the same time, I 100% think you're onto something with the geography element of this, and that is something that this organization absolutely has nothing they can do about. You're not moving the team for Chase Young, nor should they. Right. They should move the team for absolutely nothing. The team should stay put, but just not in Landover. Anyway, that's a different conversation for another time. JP Finlay with us here on the Hoffman Show for Not My Beat. Catch him tomorrow, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. over on 106.7 The Fan for B. Mitch and Finlay, also on NBC4, providing their coverage of the Commanders Beltway Football Pod as well. JP, always appreciate it, man, and I'll see you around the shop.
Thank you, buddy. See you later.
JP Finlay, everybody. When we get back, enough from us. Time to hear from you. It is time for Never Read the Comments.
This is the Hoffman Show on the T980 and the Odyssey app.